how long have you been in Mumbai for?
On and off for 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you've always been a Bandra girl?
I was just going to say that I've always been a Bandra girl. Though.
I do like Bandra. I think the thing that bugs me about Bandra is the traffic.
Yeah.
It is walkable in some way, but I think the traffic kind of kills it for me.
Yeah.
Something that people don't really know about you is that you spent your formative years in Singapore.
I did. I went to high school in Singapore,
Yeah.
WC. I think being an international boarding school student in Singapore was a very special time because one, Singapore is constantly evolving and changing. At the time, Marina Bay Sands had just come in, Clarke Quay was still a hotspot, Riverside had come up with like more new cafes and restaurants. One, I think being like exposed to global cuisine and global tastemakers was really great. You know, it kind of like set the stage for how to experience cultures in a very elevated fashion, and Singapore did that so well. Second, I was always into sports. So I feel like Singapore is where I learned rugby, which is something that's actually really popular in my hometown of Mayurbhanj. So where would you have guessed that a girl from Odisha learned rugby in Singapore? You know, Stouts rugby, no contact for me. And third, I just think the way Singapore always it was like breakneck speed development, but they completely understood conservation. So my sense of being into purposeful journeys and impact also came from understanding how can you, balance development with impact, and that doesn't have to be two separate roads. So those were like kind of lessons or like learnings or insights from travel in Singapore that I feel like picked up, whether it's Botanical Gardens, Sentosa, growing up in Dover.
But speaking of East and West, I think that's the other thing about you is that your journey has kind of been a very convoluted one, if I could say so.
Yeah.
Because you were born in Odisha, but you spent time in West Bengal,
Yes.
Singapore, and then you were in New York for a bunch,
Correct.
now Mumbai.
Yes.
What was that experience like for you in terms of kind of, again, like you said, having one foot in the East and one foot in the West?
Yeah, I think if you have a curious heart and an open mind, and that's just the journey of any global traveler, I think the experience was feeling like there weren't actually boundaries constraining you anymore to learn and being able to develop as a truly global citizen. But because I had such strong roots in India, I always felt very lucky to be from a place where my family's been in the same place for a very, very long time. So I grew up very rooted in culture, but at the same time, being able to absorb and influence the best of what the world was shaping with ideas.
And when you came back to India, was that one of those things where you kind of came back with a different lens of the people, of the craft, the heritage, having seen all these different...
Oh yeah, there's this movie called Swadesh by Shah Rukh Khan, right? So I used to I was the quintessential, I went abroad and I was like, oh my God. And suddenly you're like rose-tinted glasses about everything with your country. You love the chaos and you love the noise and you love the compact spaces we exist in this country. So I think that suddenly I truly valued the sense of community and connection back home has.
Yeah.
Through spaces, through experiences, through cuisine, through growing community, essentially.
I think one of the things that people don't realize about Singapore, and in many ways I only recently thought about, was how Singapore really is a city that arose in a tropical jungle, rainforest, and you very much still feel that even though you're surrounded by brick and glass.
But even if there's brick and glass, I think that I felt it never made you feel like it was a concrete jungle because they understood the value of bringing the outside in.
Yeah.
And I think there was a huge part to play in understanding that there were limited resources to the island city and how to sort of magnify it to make sure that you're still being able to work within climate, community and conservation over there.
Yeah. What were your favorite green spots in Singapore?
There were many in Sentosa, which now I think has so much more with Sentosa Resorts World coming up. But I definitely remember, along Dempsey, along Riverside, along going close to Arab Street and stuff. There were places where there'd be parks and there'd be greenery, and then of course the Botanical Gardens for me was massive because I feel like it really connected me to nature. I loved being there, and also being an intergenerational traveler, traveling with friends. My cousins were younger than me, my parents coming in, my grandparents. Singapore had something for everyone, and sometimes to be able to carve out that space around nature is really great.
Yeah. The next time you're in Singapore, I'm going to bring you to a place called the Green Corridor.
Okay.
And it used to be the old railway from the southern tip of Singapore all the way up through to Malaysia, and it goes far beyond. But the old railway tracks, which are obviously today disused, have been converted into a whole sort of really, really pristine walkway that takes you through the forest. And on the weekends, it's beautiful because you see families, you see people walking their little doggies, and then you see the really serious exercisers. others,
Yeah.
which, no surprises which category I fall into, not the latter.
And I think that one thing that's changed for me though is for a lot of people, like when you're visiting hotels or destinations, or it's all very calculated, right? Because you're going to write a story about it, you're going to create content about it. You're trying to make the viewer take that journey with you. So there is that like work brain, but I think for me, what I'm leaning into is transformational travel. So for example, last year I went to base camp in Mount Annapurna with my friends. When you're going with your friends for something, it's not really talking to them. You're just taking one step at a time, one foot in front of the other, you're climbing a mountain. And I think that I like now doing stuff which tests and challenges me when I'm on these trips to unwind, because your mind kind of then, looks inwards. So I do think that even with travel, there's so much that's changing what, millennials and Gen Z look at when they travel, because it's not become something they do niche and outside. Travel is just the lens with which I see now we view the world.
I'm all for going out into the remote wilderness to be transformed. Do you think that that's something that can happen in cities as well?
Cities like Bombay and places like Singapore, you're never going to go down one street and see the same thing. And if you do, there's still so many stories of people that you can observe there, food, etc. So I think it's about like having more of a curious mind than always having like an uncharted itinerary. It's about like being like, what can I experience in this street? What cultures, what food, what festivals? Because like you said, there's so much layered textures in cities like this that you're always kind of a traveler.
And I think in Mumbai and in India in general, having wonder as you go around the city is just such a transformational thing in and of itself, and you start noticing things that's special. I don't know, Singapore also kind of has layers like that just because of the different people that come in, but it always is enlightening.
I always feel when we chat, we have these insightful things. Like if someone taking notes, it's just going to be a book of quotes of Renjie and Akshita.
I'll contact my publisher. You may know a publisher or two. We'll make this work. We'll make this happen.
But no, that's beautiful. I love the way you put that.
But I think you obviously have traveled around a bunch, and you've seen a bunch of places. But that's so much a part of the work that you do, and it strikes me also that for people in the travel and kind of tourism space, what is work to you and me is oftentimes a day off for other people, or what they do on vacation to unwind, right? I'm very curious to know what your day off is like.
This is going to be funny. As being in the travel space more and more, I've become a homebody. And so my day off isn't anything which I think someone else might consider glamorous, but suddenly I love to be at home. I want to collect art for my home. And I think before, there's something about like transient natures, right? Like I always felt like I was like ships passing in the night with people and communities, because I was so I was so focused on travel and wherever that took me, and being able to explore an opportunity and dive into it. And now I feel like I feel more rooted with home base, and I like going home and spending time in Mayurbhanj and really immersing myself in the local community and culture there. Or if I'm in Bombay, having friends over, or like being in people's homes and really building community. Because at the end of the day, I think that's the one differentiator when you're in the business of travel. It's like you're kind of always moving around. I think I spend so much time at airports, right? And like there's a sense of peace I get with everyone and like just movement happening around me. And I'll be like on my podcast for an 8-hour layover.
I must say that something that struck me when we were talking earlier is that a lot of people think of heritage and lifestyle as two maybe like tangential things, overlapping. But for you, you really see it as one and the same, and I'm curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, I think that I've always seen heritage as telling a community story. It has an intangible and a tangible aspect, but it's definitely not black and white and sepia tone photos or in museums. The way heritage can be used in whether lifestyle or in community building really just stems from the fact that each generation needs to make heritage their own with a contemporary relevance.
Yeah, and I guess part of that also is balancing between sort of tradition and artisanry, the communities, and what is ultimately lifestyle, which is very contemporary and oftentimes also very commercial endeavor.
Yes.
And it's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, in India, who's
Yeah.
maybe one person that for you exemplifies kind of that balance between, heritage and contemporary lifestyle?
Yeah, I think it's Sally Holkar, who's a Padma Shri awardee from the royal family of Indore, the Holkars. They have a storied legacy in preserving and being custodians of the land they come from. But her being able to revive Chanderi over the past 3 to 4 decades, and actually when you buy a stole or a shawl or a sari in Chanderi by the handloom school in Maheshwar, it's not just a piece of garment. It's actually the story of communities over many generations. So it's a beautiful, marriage, like you said, between tradition and modernity.
So you're a frequent visitor to Singapore, and I'm just dying to know, what is it that you always end up gravitating towards whenever you go back?
So I love finding more undiscovered places because Singapore always has something new and on the scene. I recently went to Joo Chiat. We had these beautiful old Peranakan homes that had been restored very lovingly to become cafes and restaurants. We were at Choice Cuts, which was right near some of the lines of streets with the homes, and Choice Cuts and Vinyl Bar. And what I loved what we were discussing, that marriage of tradition and modernity. Of course, these old, beautiful homes have a storied legacy, but so many of them have opened up to become more modern gathering areas and watering holes for a younger community to embrace them and enjoy that.
Yeah, I think there's something so special to see, old Baroque sort of shop houses from the turn of the century. And then really some of the most edgy, hipster tattooed people. But then the other thing also I find is that every time I go to Joo Chiat, you obviously have, the young folks, tourists, visitors from all over, people who are in the know. But then you also have your aunties and uncles who are there to, whatever, get their tires changed or, buy a new cane stool or buy their snacks and so on. Yeah.
Nothing like, annoying an old auntie or uncle early in the morning to get your trip started, right?
We'll see what the aunties and uncles have to say about that. Okay, so architecture-wise, Mumbai's Art Deco or Mumbai's Victorian Neo-Gothic architecture?
Mumbai's Art Deco all the way. It's inspired way too many movies for me not to have been influenced by it. Okay, in Singapore, top 3 dishes one should have.
You're putting me on the spot because it's like, how much time do you have? Chicken rice, fish soup, very, very classic. And then the Malay nasi padang, which is just such a rich feast of the senses. Food-wise, are you like a heavy, rich kind of feast sort of person, or like a balanced, delicate meal kind of person?
I'm definitely heavy. I don't think India understands minimalism in any of its forms. But I love having something that's nourishing, even if it's heavy.
Yeah. Spicy.
Okay, in Singapore, one song that should be on your playlist if I'm traveling there.
Oh, that's very hard. We do also have a lot of sort of local indie bands. And a band that I personally love is the Sam Willows. They just do sort of the most atmospheric, really classic indie, early 2010s indie music. And oftentimes they perform along the waterfront at the Esplanade. They do these as part of the programming.
I love that.
And it's just something special to see, the glittering skyline of Singapore.